Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of your medical insurance course. This week we are going to be starting with chapter 2. We're not going to go through the entire chapter, so we're just going up through page 32 in your textbook if you have the actual hard copy of the textbook. So when you get down to the example on the bottom of page 32, that's where we're going to be stopping. That will take us up through slide 28 in this week's slide deck. So obviously you're going to get the slide deck for the entire week. For the entire chapter, but we're only going to cover about half of it for this week. So let's take a look at some of the different things that we're going to be discussing this week. The learning outcomes are listed on the first couple of slides, including some of the key terms on several slides as well. So those are going to all be covered between this week and next week. So we're going to do a lot as far as the legal issues in pharmacy, looking at HIPAA, all of the ins and outs as far as that goes and how it affects us in pharmacy. So those are all those different learning outcomes. Pay special attention to the key terms. You'll want to be able to understand how these key terms work with those learning outcomes. So make sure that you go through and look those up. Obviously don't have to write down definitions and things like that, but understand how they work within those outcomes. So those are the first several slides. So let's start with slide number 8. This is where we're going to start the actual material in this week's chapter. So this is all about healthcare regulation. So what they're trying to show you here is kind of a big overview of the different types of federal and state laws that are going to affect you and our patients when we're working in the healthcare field. So obviously protecting their health and their privacy and their health information is utmost importance, right? And because of that, because we're going to be handling those types of things, we have to make sure that we know how to correctly handle that information. So one of the regulations that you're going to be looking at is a federal regulation. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, is the agency that actually regulates healthcare, performs all kinds of different functions as far as healthcare goes. And so they're the ones that guide all of the federal level regulation. And then, of course, each state is going to have their own state regulations as well. Probably the most important thing to remember when it comes to federal and state regulations, as far as how do I know which one I should listen to, so to speak, think of it kind of as listening to mom and dad, right? You have to listen to both of them. You have to do what both of them say. And ultimately what it comes down to in any situation is you have to follow the one that's the most strict. So whichever one between federal and state guidelines is the most strict, that's the one that takes precedence over all of the others. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you look through these different types of things. Now they're going to talk a little bit about pharmacy records. Of course, obviously we're going to have access to some pieces of a patient's medical records in a pharmacy practice. And it's up to the patient to typically control the amount and type of information that's released. We have to know what we can legally share with other entities like insurance companies and things like that. So just because we have the information doesn't necessarily mean that an insurance company needs it. So we are only allowed to release information that is necessary to process a claim, et cetera, et cetera. So probably what most of you are most familiar with is HIPAA. HIPAA is specifically regarding patients' privacy and patients' health information. Now, there's actually several parts to HIPAA, and this is just kind of a simple look at what those parts are. We have the privacy rule. We have the security rule, and we have the electronic transaction and code set standards. So these are actually 3 separate parts of the HIPAA privacy guidelines. So you need to understand how all of it relates to you. So when we think of HIPAA, typically we just think, oh, we have to keep the patient's healthcare information private. Yes, that is true, but there's more to it than that. So the security piece of it actually tells us what is required in order to be able to do that. And then the electronic transaction piece talks about how to do that as well. So lots of different moving parts with that. In order to comply with HIPAA, we have to know which entities are required to obey those HIPAA laws, right? I see a lot of times, and this, on social media, people put out there, oh, you can't say who was in a car accident because that would violate their HIPAA rights. Actually, that's not true, because only covered entities are required to obey HIPAA regulations. So kind of, one of those pieces of information that not everyone is aware of. So as you go through and you continue to read through this week's material and dig into HIPAA a little bit deeper, if you have any problems or questions as you're going through the material, please make sure that you reach out to me, and have a great week.